Let's go to MS Now's Michael Schnell on Capitol Hill. MS Now Jillian Frankel in California, along with Seema Mehta, political writer for the Los Angeles Times, and legal analyst and former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney Catherine Christian. Michael, none of this is official until it happens on the House floor. So what can we expect as the House gavels in at noon for both Swalwell and Gonzalez?
Yeah, Anna, what we do know is that both Swalwell and Gonzalez announced yesterday that they're not going to be serving out the remainder of their congressional terms. What we don't know is when exactly that will become official. And we can perhaps get the first indication and word of when this will all go into effect at noon. That's when the House is going to convene for morning hour. Now, if these letters of resignation have already been filed, then whatever lawmaker is presiding over the House at that time will read the resignation letter and say when it becomes effective. And that's going to be key, because if it's effective immediately, then there you go. It's over. Once it's read on the floor, that member is no longer a member of Congress. If it's effective later down the road, well, that could influence the balance of power for a little bit. And again, we don't exactly know those specifics from Swalwell and Gonzalez's statements yesterday. In fact, Swalwell in his statement said he would work over the coming days with his staff to ensure they can continue to serve his constituents when he's no longer a member. Tony Gonzalez said he plans to file his retirement today, but not saying when it becomes effective. So we're going to have to find out more details as the day unfolds. Also worth noting, the first time the House will be back in session since that 2-week recess.
So we knew Gonzalez was not running for re-election. Does his seemingly abrupt retirement announcement come as a surprise? And explain the difference in terms of the takeaway or the fallout when you're retiring versus simply resigning.
It was sort of the writing on the wall, the fact that Tony Gonzalez wouldn't have enough support and would face a lot of pressure to not continue his congressional term. As the fallout from Eric Swalwell was unfolding up here on Capitol Hill, a lot of folks had said they wanted to see him either resign or be expelled. But at the same time, they said the same for Tony Gonzalez. Tony Gonzalez admitted to having an affair with a staffer who later died by suicide. As you mentioned, he says he has no involvement with her death. But they were both allegations of misconduct with staffers, wildly different stories. But for that reason, we saw members of Congress sort of lump them together. So once we heard that Eric Swalwell would be resigning from Congress, we heard almost immediately members on both sides of the aisle say that's fine, but we still need Tony Gonzalez to take responsibility. He either needs to resign or be expelled. So I think he sort of saw the writing on the wall there, that because they were a package deal, he was going to have to face the music at some point. To your last question, Anna, the difference between resigning and retiring, that's sort of what we're still trying to figure out, of when exactly Tony Gonzalez plans to officially step out of Congress. But it seems like it's just that resigning has more of a negative connotation. Perhaps retiring has more of a positive feel to it. But again, we are still having to figure out when exactly this will all take effect. And that's when we can say for certain.
Jillian, in just a few hours, we're expecting a press conference there in California with what we were told is the story of yet another Swalwell accuser. What do we know about this?
Yeah, Anna, as you mentioned, this is set to take place in just a few hours at a law firm here in Los Angeles. We don't yet know the identity of this alleged victim, but this is a new accuser who we haven't yet heard from before in previous reporting. Her attorneys say that she has claims of serious sexual misconduct against the congressman. We're also expecting to hear directly from her attorneys about the next steps moving forward in the legal process. And one of her attorneys has already taken to social media to say that she believes Swalwell is resigning in order to avoid that ethics investigation in Congress. Anna?
Jillian Frankel, thank you. We know you'll keep us posted. Seema, we spoke yesterday about how Swalwell's congressional district is reliably blue, but I want to play what the Speaker Emerita, who helped propel Swalwell's career, said about his resignation.
I think it's a smart decision
to make. The right thing to do?
Yes, the right thing to do, yes. Not to subject members to have to take a vote on something like that, and not to subject your family. If you have a challenge that you have to address, it's best addressed not as a candidate for governor and not as a member of Congress.
Seema, politically bigger picture, where does this leave Democrats? The party's been leaning into Trump controversies, hoping to make Republican corruption a big focus of the midterm campaigns.
Right. I mean, as you said, the district is pretty reliably blue, so I don't think that the Democrats are going to have a problem there. But I mean, a lot of Democrats have been speaking for a long time about, all the accusations and allegations against President Trump, going back to the 2016 presidential election. And so the idea that, that Swalwell sort of inappropriate behavior was kind of like the worst kept secret in Washington, D.C. I mean, I do think there's going to be some ramifications. Who knew what and who knew it when?
Catherine Swalwell's resignation now ends effectively the House ethics probe that had just really begun. But there are now criminal investigations we're learning of here in New York. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office is investigating. There are separate allegations in California. Where do you see this heading?
Well, the alleged sexual assault happened allegedly in Manhattan. That's a state crime. The Manhattan DA's office has to investigate, and we'll take it seriously, not just because it's a high-profile case. And it'll be interesting whether or not the alleged victim reached out to the Manhattan DA or they intend to reach out to her and see if she wants to cooperate. It's a very serious charge, rape in the first degree. That's what it's called in New York. The only more serious charge is murder. So if you're convicted of that, it's a minimum of 5 years, a maximum of 25 years. But an investigation doesn't necessarily mean a prosecution, right. But there will be a very serious investigation conducted here in Manhattan.
Walk us through what that investigation will look like when, as you put it, the burden of proof is what will determine whether they convict beyond a reasonable doubt, will determine whether they actually move forward with charges, right?
Exactly. Unlike a civil lawsuit where it's a much less lower burden, is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's the policy, and I worked there for 30 years, of the Manhattan DA's office, and it was also DOJ's policy. If you don't believe you have proof beyond a reasonable doubt, you don't even go into the grand jury. So it's going to be obtaining text messages, obtaining, if there is, depending on how long ago this allegedly happened and where it happened, surveillance, obviously interviewing her, interviewing any people she may have immediately told this to. They're called prompt outcry witnesses. He does not have to speak to them, but he may offer to give his side of the story. Is he saying, this never happened, I never met this woman, or is he saying, it happened, but it was consensual, she's lying? So that also will determine what the DA's office will do.
Michael, this Capitol Hill reckoning could also be coming for two more lawmakers, as I touched on, both from Florida and again from opposing parties. Where do those ethics investigations stand, and what does it signal about where this Congress is heading?
Yeah, Anna, it's entirely possible that the House ends this week with fewer members than it started, and that number can continue to drop next week. There are two other members of Congress who are also under the microscope from their fellow lawmakers. That's Congressman Corey Mills and Congresswoman Sheila Scherflis McCormick. Corey Mills, Republican from Florida, Scherflis McCormick, a Democrat. Corey Mills is under investigation by the Ethics Committee for potential violations of campaign finance laws, disclosure laws, and also potential sexual misconduct. Scherflis McCormick was indicted last year for stealing $5 million in FEMA funds and using them for her 2021 campaign. Those allegations also under investigation by the Ethics Committee. This could all come to fruition next week because last month the Ethics Committee held a very rare public hearing to look into these allegations against Scherflis McCormick. And in the end, they found that she is guilty of more than 20 violations. Now, there's going to be another public hearing next week to announce the sanctions against her. Some folks say it could be expulsion. But even if it's not, there are already some Republicans who say they are going to move to expel her from Congress once the Ethics Committee has wrapped up its business, which will be next week. And as there are conversations about Scherflis McCormick, a lot of folks bringing in Corey Mills. He's someone who, again, has been under the microscope for a while. There have been calls for his expulsion. Whether you like it or not, politics has seeped into this process because the House is so narrowly divided. Democrats don't want to expel one of their own without making sure a Republican goes as well to keep the balance of power even. That being said, if Scherflis McCormick goes next week, there's a very good chance Corey Mills goes out with her.
Speaking of balance of power, Seema, my understanding is in California, they might not hold a special election to replace the congressman. How does that work there?
I think we still have to figure out the timing. It depends, when he resigns, when that goes into effect, because that'll set up the calendar. So the governor will have to, in consultation with the Secretary of State's office, will have to determine that. But it's really based on when the resignation goes into effect. And from his statement, it seems clear that it's not going to be immediate. Like he said, he's going to work with staff to make sure his constituents still have services. And then also, it's just he might have to deal with family stuff, like he needs to figure out health insurance and that kind of thing. So he said he plans to retire. So we don't know when that moment will be, and that will sort of set the clock off ticking.
Catherine, Politico reports about a whisper network that brought down Congressman Eric Swalwell, writing, quote, warnings about the lawmaker had long circulated privately. Then a handful of women and online creators pushed them into public view. Could anyone who knew about the congressman's alleged behavior also face accountability? And also, I keep thinking about additional accusers, and maybe their accusations aren't rising to the level of rape like this one woman's, but could their stories factor into any criminal case?
Yes, certainly if there are other women who he may not have allegedly sexually assaulted, but leered at, forcibly touched. They are relevant people that the DA's office, whether it's going to be in California, Manhattan, would want to speak to see if he has a pattern of conduct. People who knew about it and didn't do anything, that's not criminal. Now, obviously, if they're congressional staffers who knew, they may have their comeuppance in Congress. But criminal liability, no. But certainly the DA's office is going to want to speak to other women that are either accusing of sexual assault or sexual misconduct, which may not rise to the level of rape.
Catherine Christian, as always, thank you. Michael Schnell, Seema Mehta, appreciate your reporting very much.